Before we dive in, here's some real talk. If you're a leader, entrepreneur, or builder of anything, there's a whole stash of free tools waiting for you at papernapkinwisdom.com. We're talking mindset, strategy, clarity, no catch. Just ask. You can even hit the link in bio and grab what you need to move forward faster.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, my name is Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 278. This is the place where a single line on a napkin can open a door you didn't realize was there. And as you listen today, you might begin to notice the one shift that turns scattered learning into focused results. Today's guest is Rhett Power, builder, coach, author. You've likely felt his fingerprints on conversations about leadership and growth. And as you lean in now, you can imagine what happens when someone who has been in the arena brings a simple truth you can use today. Not theory, not more noise, something you can apply in a sales call, a one-on-one, or even your next tough decision. In a few minutes, Rhett will share a short line that he keeps close. I won't spoil it, but when you hear it, you may find yourself thinking, of course, and now I know what to do next. Notice how that lands. Because when you allow that idea to take root, you can start to see your week differently. Meetings get clearer, priorities get lighter, and momentum feels inevitable. So take a breath, grab a pen, and maybe even a napkin, and let your mind wander to a place where insight quietly becomes impact. As you hear Rhett, you can choose to try one small action before the day ends. Something that proves what you learned in a place that matters. All right, let's dive in. Rhett Power, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have our conversation today.
Man, I'm so pleased to be here. So I look forward to it.
Yeah, so it's actually really cool. The way the fan is turning gently in the background, it looks like you've got this little halo over your head, which is really great, especially considering your napkin. So growth doesn't come from what we know, but from how we apply what we learn. Why did you share that with me?
I probably should have learned that lesson, early in my life, but it took me until my 30s to really, really have that sort of crystallize for me. And it was, as I was thinking about this show and listening to your previous episodes, I knew that question was going to come. So, I thought about it, and the first thing that really came to mind is that crystallized for me when I started my first company. And it was, the backstory is that I'd worked for the U.S. government overseas and spent most of my early career overseas, and quit that job to actually start a company with a friend. And, what we learned was that the stakes were just higher. When you own a company and you're responsible for payroll, and you're supporting people, and you're supporting and doing what you do for your customers, and you have so much more at stake. And so, mistakes were costly. When you make a mistake and you didn't learn from it, well, those are business killers. And so, I really learned that we had to learn from our mistakes. We had to learn and not repeat them. And so I think that's why that it's been so important for me that, the last 20 or so years is, uh, growth really does come from applying what you learn. And that's because you're not at this stage, when you own a business and when you're running a business and you've got so much on the line, you have to, otherwise you fail. I mean, that's why businesses fail. So, yeah.
One of the things that I think is really powerful, and it jumped out to me when I saw your napkin first, Rhett, was the word learn at the end. I mean, it felt like it was bigger than the rest of the words. And you're using that word really intentionally, and you brought it back up again, even in answering your question. And the question, learning from what's happening is really key. And we don't do that well, right? Like we're not good at that
Oh,
learning part. We're kind of slow at that learning part. How did you how did you turn on that learning muscle? Or how did you practice that learning muscle? Because it's tough because part of it is also as an entrepreneur, you have to tune certain things out, but you have to really be tuned in to learn on other things.
I think I think that going back to the business is, we almost failed, and we were really on that edge, and for probably 2 or 3 years. And I know it's a cliche, and people, yeah, it's a cliche. I'll just say that we didn't succeed until we started thinking and actually working on the business and being strategic, learning from everything that we had done. For years, for our first few years, we worked in the business so much that we never had time to learn, to your point. We never had time to think. We never had time to be strategic. We were always doing. And when we stepped out of that, when were able to pull ourselves kicking and screaming out of that day to day, making those deliveries, which, look, we had to go through that. We had to go through that because we needed to learn the business. We needed to learn the customers. We needed to learn the pain points, the objections. We needed to have all that. We needed to learn that. But taking that learning and then applying it is what we were lacking. And when we did that, I mean, the light bulb went off. Like our growth exploded, right?
When you
Because we
start to
were
apply what you learned. And
right.
but you can't do that from behind the wheel of the delivery truck,
No,
right? Because you're just on the treadmill. And I think that this is what a lot of us get caught up with in the early stages of business is we're seeing this stuff and we think we can just outwork it, right?
yeah.
We think that we can just, oh, I'll just put in another couple hours and all of a sudden you total up the hours and you're at 28, you're at 30. It's like, holy crap, what am I doing?
I mean, I've even said no one's going to outwork me. I have said that.
Right.
I mean, I have said that. I mean, years and years ago, I'd say that. That was my mantra.
It's a badge of honor for a lot of starting entrepreneurs, right? And not just starting entrepreneurs.
100%.
I know entrepreneurs that have scaled some pretty badass big companies, but they're just I'm going to die on the treadmill. I'm going to
Yeah.
outwork you. And and when you do that, you don't have the room to apply what you learned. So what I find really interesting about your story is you said, you didn't really grow until you got out of the business. And it is so cliche, working on the business, working in the business. But when you made that transition to be able to isolate some time to apply what you learned by working on it, how did things change? How did you first of all let's stop and say, how did you make that time? Where did that realization come from? What was the moment when you said, "Oh, I can't keep on doing this"?
I mean, I, I mean, here's the story to that is I stopped doing everything that made me, right? I like music. I like good food. I like being on the water. I'm a pretty active person. But when you stop all that and you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well, you're not making great decisions, right? You're on that treadmill and you've got it on, you know, 20, right? We were tired and burned out.
Mm.
And you know, and we had a couple of really good people in our lives that said, "Hey, this this isn't working," right? And you look at the bank account, it's not working. And when the discussion is, "Oh, I have to go back to Afghanistan to make money," right? I have to go back and go back to doing something that I enjoyed and I loved, But to make this work, I've got to go back and to fund this, to continue doing this, to live our dream here. I've got to go like take a contracting job over there. So there were some inflection points, really. Like health wasn't great. Like, I'm tired, I'm burned out, and this isn't working, and we're not on the plan that we thought we were on. Those were the points where we said, look, we've got to do something different. We've got to, and we got a lucky break. Here's the thing, too. We were down to probably our last $3,000 or $4,000. We went to Toy Fair in New York at the behest of a customer who begged us to come. And we said, look, we don't have the money to come. We're going to have to sleep in our van if we come to New York. We can't afford to be in New York. We can't even afford a booth. We finally were able to get a booth in the back of the Javits Center for Toy Fair, and like a horrible little table. But we walked out a $10 million company. So all of a sudden, because this customer had been elected as the chair of the National Small Toy Store Association, she went in their annual general meeting and like said, look, this is the only product that's working. You got to buy it. We walked out of that scratching our heads thinking, God, how are we going to do this now? Because now we have 400 stores that we've got to service. So it actually forced us to get strategic, and it forced us to actually get off the truck and start working on how we were going to solve this new wonderful problem that we had. And all of those things sort of combine at the same time, and it just forced us to take action, step out, hire some people to help us do the things that we shouldn't be doing, teach them how to do it, and then actually solve the problem, how we were going to fulfill these orders, how we were going to get the credit to fulfill those orders, how we were going to, move the company forward. And that's what pushed us out of the day-to-day into the strategic. We had to figure out how we were going to ship all that stuff. We had to figure out how to set up a production line to service all that new business. So it actually forced us to do it. And it wasn't, I say kicking and screaming, it was all of that combined that forced us to be strategic. And it wasn't a decision I made. It was circumstance. Thank goodness.
Right. I'm laughing about you sleeping in the truck because I remember when I was building my business and I'd be going back and forth to other cities, and there were times when I couldn't afford hotels all the time. And so there were two tactics I had. One was to leave strategically early enough in the morning that I would be driving in the early hours, and then I'd change into a suit in a parking garage and then go do my meetings and then come back down, nap in the car and drive back. And that's how it looked like I could make those 8 o'clock meetings, but I would be leaving my town, at 11, 12, 1, 2, whatever, just to organize myself that I was going to arrive on time and be able to do that. So I know what that feels like. The other thing that I think is a really interesting thing is you said that you caught a lucky break, you got the big sale that forced you, and that's the word you used, forced you to solve different problems. It forced you out of the truck to solve how you're going to fill those orders, how you're going to get the credit to fill those orders, how are you going to handle shipping, how are you going to handle all these things. Can we do that before we're forced to? Like we can, right? Can't we? Like we could just decide to solve those other problems, couldn't we?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a great question. I don't have an answer for it. I don't know that I would have. I don't know that I would have not just run it in the ground, trying and trying and trying to solve all the problems myself, trying and trying to go out there and make the sales. I don't know. Is it in our nature? I'd throw it back. Is it in an entrepreneur's nature to want to give up? Now I do now because I know it's easier now to do that.
Right.
But early on, the first business, I don't know. That's a good question.
Right. I think though that one of the things that we need to learn and apply is how not just to take over everything. And it's kind of what makes us entrepreneurs, but doesn't make us really great business people. Right? And there's a big difference
A
between
big difference.
between those two things. So
Big difference. Yeah.
so now that you've learned that, Rhett, I think it's one of those things you can't unlearn once you learn how to set people up with the system tools and structures they need and then follow through, hold them and treat them as accountable. You can't unlearn how to do some of those things. It becomes a different pattern. How how does that look for you? Like, what, is that still? Do you feel like there's the pull to take over anymore, or do you feel like you've got a good balance?
I've got a good balance. What I did learn about that is, early in my career, I was never much of a control person. I became a control person in that first business. And what I learned about myself is that's not who I am, and that's not who I want to be. And so I have learned to let go, but it's also not my natural state to hold on tight to everything.
Mm.
I actually, um, I'm not I'm not a detail person. I've learned that about myself too. I'm not a detail person. I'm a bigger picture person. I'm a relationship person. I'm a strategic thinker. Um, I never liked the part of the business to make sure that John showed up to drive the truck. I never liked the part of the business to make sure the production line was running smooth and the things were working on time. I like that was never my strong suit, and so naturally, yes, I actually it's pretty easy for me to delegate. It's pretty easy for me to teach. I'm a teacher by heart, and so I like to teach people how to do it. But I don't like to make sure I'm not a real detail person. I'm not going to get in the weeds of every little thing. Um, and I like to inspect. I like to look. I like to make sure things are doing what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be doing it. But I don't like making sure you're doing that you're doing everything I'm not a detail person in that way. So it naturally, yes.
So I think there's a really interesting thing that comes from that, because you talk about what we know versus what we learn, and that's another part of the napkin. I think there's what you know about yourself and what you know about how you like to work and what your strengths are, and you just talked about that a little bit. But I don't think that's the only thing you're talking about. Growth doesn't come from what we know; comes from how we apply what we learn. There's a distinction between what we know and what we learn. What does that distinction mean to you?
That's a really good question. Um, I think we often know a lot.
Mhm.
Um, are we consistent in applying it? Are we um, and this goes back here. I'll say this to me. That leads me into all kinds of thought, a whole nother rabbit hole of: are you doing things based on your values? Are you doing things? Um, are you making decisions based on your values? Are you consistent in applying those values to decision making? Um, so what I know is important, but applying it, and kind of rambling here, but I think um, I think we're often not consistent in what we know, and how we apply that, and how we teach people what we know, so that they can learn from us. Um, does that make sense? I don't know if that
Yeah,
answered the
so
question.
I think what you're saying is applying what we learn is not just sticking rigidly to what we know, but applying it, getting feedback about it, working with your team, adjusting what that is, and again, it goes back to you got forced into different thinking. You got forced out of the delivery truck, and you had to solve other problems. And when you started solving those other problems, you were forced to learn something and then apply those learnings, which
Mm,
probably changed the way that truck was driven. Probably changed. It wasn't done the way Rhett was doing it. you know, probably the driver wasn't sleeping in it either on the way to a New York toy show, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that you solved, you adjusted.
Yeah.
And I think that being intentional about that's really important, right? I think we have to
Yeah.
create a feedback loop where we can learn from what's happening. And it sounds like you're really diligent about that. How do you stay close to the ground with your team? Because as much as you're empowering people, it doesn't sound like you're saying, okay, just go off and this is how to do it. You're more engaged than that. You're teaching. What does that look like?
It's funny. Just right before this uh, conversation, I was having a coaching call with a COO who and that company's gone through massive growth, right? And he's in this new phase of his professional career where he's not doing and he's inspecting, right? And that's a huge transition for him. It's hard. It's been actually really hard. We were talking about how he spends his time, and he was like, "What happens when I'm on a phone call and it's a 2 hour? I've got a 2 hour block scheduled, and I listen the first 15 minutes, and they're doing everything right. I don't need to spend the next 2 hours on that call. What do I do with my time?" you know.
Yeah.
Um, so it is a challenge, but I think it's being present. It's letting people know that you're there. It's showing up. It's sitting in on meetings. It's walking through the warehouse or the office. It's having those water cooler conversations. It's being around and talking to people intentionally. I have a client, and this is a wonderful example. He's got about 280 people in his organization, and he goes to lunch with somebody every day that he's in town. And it could be somebody on the cleaning staff, it could be somebody on the line, it can be somebody in finance or somebody in marketing. But he goes to lunch with somebody every day, and so that every year he gets to sit down with everybody in the organization. Right? He's not doing all of their jobs. He's removed himself from a lot of that type of work, but he's keeping in touch. And that's what I do. I don't go to lunch with everybody, but I sit down and talk to everybody in the organization. And it's important to know who they are as people. It's important to know who they are as professionals, what they want to accomplish, and more importantly, what feedback do they have for me?
I think that's really powerful because applying what you learn also you talked about the teaching part, but coaching is a big part of that. And you talked about coaching clients, but you're also talking about that from the construct of coaching your team. And there's really, to coach somebody, you really need to have two things. You need to have a challenge, they need to challenge your
Mm-hmm.
person, but at the same time, you need to have a connection. And I think people overlook the value of connection. And the better, the higher the challenge, the higher the connection you need to have. You can't challenge somebody with whom you have no connection, right? Like, so
Right.
it sounds like you're really intentional about making sure that you're connected. And it doesn't have to be a lunch. It doesn't have to be, it has to look like you. It has to feel like you. It has to be authentic, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And and people have to feel you have to build a culture, I think, where people feel like they can give you honesty. And then, look, I realize CEO, I'm gonna get the sugar coated version of it, right? A lot of times.
Mhm.
Um, but I can still learn from that conversation. And if I can read between the lines, or if I can put that together with another conversation somewhere else, I learn a lot. And people, I think what people do is they appreciate that,
Yeah.
and they appreciate that they're being heard. And I think that's an important part of leadership today. I know a lot of people say those are soft skills, but I think they're actually critical skills. Um,
Yeah, right. They do sort of like diminish the value that, accountability is hard. No,
yeah,
it's curious. And another CEO, I was talking to a CEO just a little while ago. He's talking about how he was uncovering another conversation and just didn't feel right. So what he did was he said his spidey senses were going off,
yeah,
and he got curious. He just got more curious about the conversation, and it sounds like that's what you're talking about, but that doesn't come in passing, dropping a bomb on someone's desk, walking out the door. It comes from, again, this is what we learn. This is how we learn. We learn from our team,
Right.
right?
Right. We know what we know, right? And when we learn it and we put that knowing and that learning together, then we find solutions. We find the problems, and we can find solutions in that. I think that's a great connection you just made.
Right. And that forces us out of the truck again, like using that metaphor. It gets us out of the truck, gets us out of being in something
Mm-hmm.
and working on it. And isn't isn't growth about, to some degree, solving challenges, solving problems, finding the opportunity in the problem and moving through it in some way? Isn't that part of it?
I think so. I think it's going back to what we just said. I think when you can put knowing and learning together, that's growth. I think it's like
Right.
a, know plus learn plus, equals growth. I think maybe we can make some
Times
sort of equation.
application,
Right.
times
Right.
execution.
Plus execution. Right. Something like, yeah, we can probably put an equation to that, or some, little formula thing there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think growth comes from all of that. And then I think growth comes from also being willing to have all those conversations, willing to put the
Mm.
intentional work into knowing and learning and the execution part. I think that's where growth comes, I think.
So, have you always wanted to have that? I mean, you said, look, part of the knowing also is knowing who you are, knowing what your strengths are. You said you're not a
Hmm.
detail oriented person, but you're a teacher at heart. So it
Hmm.
feels like in your partnership that when you were building the business, that the right thing for you was to connect with the people and learn from them, get the feedback and bring it back to your team. Is that so? You leaned into that. Am I right in hearing that?
I leaned into that, that because my business partner was the detail oriented person of the organization, right? He made sure the numbers worked. He made sure the finances worked. He made sure the operations worked. I went out and I created product. I actually went and did all of the sales. I did the I made sure that the production in China and in the US was work, that things things got produced, they got to the customers on time. I had the customer relationship. I held the customer relationship. Um, but we were all responsible for, you know, building, and he was just as good at the people part as he was at the numbers part too. So we shared that, but absolutely. I mean, that was part of why we were successful in that company, is because we were a small team. We couldn't get any. This was during the financial crisis back in the 2000s. We couldn't get any funding, so we had to bootstrap this the whole way. And even when we had, a $50 million company, $100 million company, um, the banks didn't want to touch us because we were a product company. We were a consumer product company dealing with Target and Walmart and Toys R Us, and wasn't a great wasn't a great risk for them. And so, we always had to be lean. We always had to be, and so we had to build a team that believed in us, trusted us. That was the way we were able to get talent, because we couldn't, and we were located in a place that didn't have a lot of natural toy talent. So we had to build a scrappy team, and we did that by believing in them, trusting in them, relying on them, really being transparent with them. I mean, we were transparent when the numbers we were down to $4,000. We were transparent with them when we had, when we were doing 100 million in sales. So, that built, um, that just built trust with them, and that we were
Mhm.
very intentional about that, because we had to, because we needed them. We didn't have a big exec team. We didn't have our designers weren't from the fit design school that design toys. We didn't have a CFO that went to Wharton. We didn't have the team that a lot of these other these other companies were able to attract. So, we had to be lean. So,
And you had to care a lot, and you had to learn, because why do you want the people that have the pedigree? Because presumably, and it's a presumption, they
right.
learn. That's why we want to recruit them. But the other side of it is, if you build a culture around learning, you'll outpace them. Like you said, you were scrappy, so you found a way, and and the ability to be curious enough to problem solve and learn from what's happening and adjust what you're doing. That's a superpower. That's how
Yeah.
the little person, the little guy, ends up always winning. I love it when I talk to entrepreneurs and we talk about a financial crisis, because it feels like it's a perpetual motion machine. It feels like we're always in a financial crisis. There's some crisis in our world, right? So,
That's
um,
right.
so having that mindset that you're working on things and learning and applying it, making that connection between what we know and what we learned to find that spidey sense is really super important, right?
Yeah. Let me say one other thing too. I was just thinking about this to answer one of your questions. Like, I think growth is actually behavioral.
Mm.
Um, because I think it's in the risk and the change and the moment you try something new. Um, I think in a lot of ways, for me anyway, I think growth is behavior, and is changing behaviors. It's learning to change those behaviors.
So it's really interesting that you say that, right? So growth is in changing behaviors, and and
I think
and
so.
that's really, I mean, that's really insightful. What do you think were some of the behaviors that changed fundamentally for you from those early days to now? When you look back, if you could give young Rhett a gift when he started his business,
Hmm.
what would be the behavior growth or behavior change that you wish you could give yourself, even though you wouldn't listen, because none of us listen at that
I
stage. Yeah, we like, who's this old guy? Go away, right?
you took the words right out of my mouth. I wouldn't have listened, but behavioral changes. I think now I do not let. I have boundaries. I have boundaries around work and play, health, um, being present in those important moments, um, relationships. Um, I don't forget myself, and I don't forget what's important, what's really, really important, because the business is important, but it's not. Um, it's not. It's not everything, and it's not who I am. I don't. I haven't lost myself in the identity of being, um, of being the CEO of a business, or being or a contributor to this magazine or that magazine, or this book, this author, this. I don't lose myself in any of those things. I think so. Those are the behavioral changes. Like, for me, it's making sure I'm getting the sleep, getting sure I'm eating well, making sure that I am spending time with family, friends, making sure that I'm doing the hobbies and the things I really, really love, that
Yeah.
give me the space to be creative in business, and the the break that you need to make better decisions. So I don't compromise on those. That's the behavior change.
Yeah, but it's still got to feel good as a music fan to find an article in Rolling Stone every now and then, right? That's got to be good.
Oh, oh yeah, I go see a show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. So let me I wonder if you noticed how much you lit up when you talked about the fact that you found boundaries. Did you notice that I mean, the tone of voice changed and you really went into your heart? It felt like that was
Yeah.
growth. Like, if you're listening, go and catch the video of this, because Rhett really just made that connection in that moment. And that's a gift. It's a gift that you're giving everybody when you share this wisdom, but it's a gift that you've given yourself and the people you care
Yeah.
about, right?
Big time.
And
Big
that's
time.
probably changed everything, right?
Oh, I mean, yeah. If you'd have seen the conversations at home, in those times when I'm in the van, driving 200 and something thousand miles in a year. And I don't know if we did that, but probably making that up, but it felt like it, it was every weekend. It was every week. It was nonstop, those conversations weren't pretty.
No.
And I missed some really key moments when my kids were really young, and I can't do that anymore. So
I think it's really important for entrepreneurs who are on that growth phase to hear this too. It's not too late to change that, right? Because that was
yeah,
my reality. I was, in the airline. I was the top tier for 10 years and all that kind of stuff, and I missed a lot. And then around 6 and a bit years ago, that travel schedule changed because of family emergency. And I'm convinced that my kids don't know a reality when I was traveling anymore. I mean, they've just sort of erased that from their minds, and that's a gift. So it's never too late, isn't it? Like you can do this. Growth,
yeah.
it's never too late to grow and change those behaviors.
Look, one of the biggest childhood memories, or most meaningful childhood memories I have, is, I was a wrestler. So, and wrestling matches are on like Tuesday nights and Thursday nights or something. I can't in high school, right?
Mm.
And growing up, and even when you're young. And what I remember, and my father traveled for work. He went out of town. He was in the state, but he was gone during the week. I remember him being at those matches every Tuesday night and Thursday night, pacing up and down the mat as I went on, right? That's all I remember. I don't remember if I won or lost. I don't even remember my record. I was pretty good. I went to college to wrestle, but all I remember is him being, pacing up and down, yelling the move that I should be making at that moment, right?
Right.
That's what I remember, and it almost brings tears to my eyes. Like, that is a moment that is burned in my memory, and I didn't want to give that up to my kids because I wanted to be on the sidelines and they were playing soccer or playing music in their recitals. That's what I wanted to be. That's the dad I wanted to be.
It's
So,
it is emotional to hear, and I connect to that very deeply. So thanks for sharing that, Rhett.
yeah.
Something we've been doing this season is we've been shouting out and calling out a great friend of Paper Napkin Wisdom. His name was John Rulin. He gave us a great napkin, which was "What you appreciate appreciates." Now, he turned that into a movement, wrote a book called Giftology, renamed his company Giftology, and created a revolution around gratitude. And what we're asking all our guests to do is to sort of shout him out, recognize what he gave us as a gift. He suddenly passed away, and all the more important now to continue this legacy. So, is there someone that you'd like to shout out and give some appreciation to?
Two people, or a couple people probably, but real quick. So I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and a guy named Chester Elton gave this to me. It's a gratitude rock, and he gave me gratitude for something that I had done for him, and so thank you, Chester, for this. This is very meaningful. But I'd also like to shout out to a good friend, David Meltzer. David is become a good friend, become a business partner, and I just appreciate his love and his advice and his support and all that I'm doing. And so, yeah, I'd give that to David today.
That's awesome. Rhett, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a wrap on episode 278 with Rhett Power. Rhett, thanks for taking us from learning to doing with such clarity. As you're hearing this, you might already notice the one small move you're ready to make, because when you choose to apply what you know, results tend to follow. And here's some quick takeaways you can use right now. Application is greater than accumulation. The more you use what you learn, the more you learn what actually works. Accountability is a system. When there's a visible cadence, owners dates, and outcomes, follow through becomes natural. Constraints create focus. Limits can invite creativity and sharpen priorities. Micro experiments win. Small, reversible tests turn into evidence fast. Lead by example. Teams copy what you demonstrate, not what you declare. 30-second next step. Here's something you can do now. Open your calendar and tag one meeting this week with a simple close. Decision, owner, date. As you imagine playing that out, you can already see how much cleaner next week will feel. And before the day ends, write one line on a napkin. Maybe it's the smallest action you'll take to prove something you've already learned. Snap it, share it with us if you'd like at hashtag Paper Napkin Wisdom. What's the tiniest proof of learning you'll execute in the next 24 hours? And who will hold you accountable? If this episode sparked momentum, follow, rate, and review the show. It helps more leaders find these conversations. And if someone on your team needs this shift from knowing to doing, share this episode with them now. Until next time, keep turning small ideas into big results. And as you notice yourself applying just one idea from today, you may realize you've already started. And make it a great day.